My name is Eliz Markowitz. I'm running to be your next state representative for House District 28. We have a special election coming up. January 21st through 24th is early voting, and election day is January 28th. And if you have any questions after this, I'm an open book. Love to answer any and all questions you have. But for now, let's just keep the ball rolling.
Beto O'Rourke, volunteer for the Eliz Markowitz campaign. And the biggest fan in the world of Mom's Demand. Mom's Demand made such an impression on us in 2017 and 2018 when we were in literally every county in Texas. And we're so pleasantly surprised to see so many moms and dads and children standing up on the issue of gun violence. And having the courage to do that in front of their neighbors, people in their community who may not feel the same way that they did, which in turn inspired others to have the courage to do the right thing. And I'm confident that when Eliz is elected and John and Ron are returned now to the majority, they're going to make progress on gun violence because of the work that you all have been doing. So could not be more grateful for what you all have already accomplished, and looking forward to working with you in the future. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah. I'm Ron Reynolds, proud to serve as state representative for District 27, which is in Fort Bend County, and I can't tell you how much I'm waiting to have Liz join John and I with the Beto-led majority that he's helping us going to get. We're claiming it, we're speaking it into existence, but gun violence and is such a critical, important discussion for us to find solutions on. And I think Beto led that, helped lead that discussion and really focus on it in terms of the larger frame at the national level. So here in Texas, we have a lot of work to do going forward, and I'm really confident that once we get that Democratic majority, we will be able to finally pass some comprehensive gun reforms that Mom's Demand Action has been leading on, and we're way behind, but we're going to get there. So I'm happy to be here today to be a part of this great discussion.
Thanks, Ron.
My name is Peggy Wright, and I'm the Director of Sexual Assault and Counseling Programs with Fort Bend Women's Center. I've been with the Women's Center for 10 years. Prior to that, I worked at Domestic Violence Prevention Incorporated in Texarkana, where we served, I think, 5 counties in Arkansas and 3 in Texas. So I've been in the field for about 22 years. And I was just going to share my very first week of employment was when the Columbine shooting happened. And I just thought, we've got to do something about this. And it blew my mind that all this time has passed and nothing's gotten better. And of course, you know, I'm here to represent the overlap with domestic violence and gun violence in general. And we got to do something. That's all I have to say. We have to do something.
My name is Kelly McManus. I am an emergency response advocate at Fort Bend Women's Center, and I do a lot of court accompaniment, and it's really difficult for them to even get protective orders as it is, or even get convictions. A lot of times we're seeing that the domestic violence arrests are being pled down to Class C misdemeanors, even and stuff like that, and so that's also hindering them getting their guns taken away. And actually, the reason I am an advocate.
Sorry, can you help us understand that? So, depending on what you are charged with and convicted of, that will determine whether your gun is removed from you after you've abused somebody in your household?
Yes, because if it's not a felony conviction, and so say that yes, a gun was used in the commission of the assault, and it was if they get a felony conviction, then yes, that gun gets taken away from them. But we're seeing a big trend in Fort Bend of them getting pled down to misdemeanors, and
you get to keep your gun.
Yes.
Let's say a scenario might be someone has abused their spouse, used a gun or threatened that spouse with a gun. If it gets pled down to a misdemeanor, they can keep the gun that they used to intimidate or abuse their spouse.
Yes, if I could interrupt, I literally emailed our assistant district attorney who's in charge of the DV division in Fort Bend County to get more information, and he told me they are confiscated if there's a final protective order and in the commission of a felony crime.
Wow.
But what they also don't say is they don't confiscate all the guns, just the one used in the crime.
Wow.
And the average Texas gun owner has over 20 guns, or firearms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the batterer may still have a whole lot of firearms. Not only that, I worked with the batterers program for over 10 years, and they used to tell me they're supposed to surrender their firearms, but what they do is they just give them to a family member to hold for them, so they still have access to
Which is
them
legal.
anytime they want.
Which is legal to do.
Yeah, we'll get to that, but yeah, I'm with you on the relinquishment laws for sure. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that with us. That's so helpful.
Hi everyone, I'm Cameron Samuels and I'm the president of the Seven Lakes High School Democrats. And in the past 2 years, I've been immensely involved in gun violence prevention. I have worked with the March for Our Lives, Everytown, and I have also worked with the Religious Action Center on gun violence prevention efforts. And so I'm deeply honored to participate in this discussion.
Thanks, Kim.
Hi, I'm Alexis Lockhart, born and raised Texan, CHL holder, gun violence survivor, and a member of Moms Demand Action.
I'm Jennifer Lorenz. I'm the legislative lead for the Northwest group of moms. So we go from Cypress and Tomball all the way up to the Woodlands, of course, and then way up to Crosby and Willis.
Oh, wow.
It's a very large area, and we have the largest group in Texas.
Wow.
We have over 700 members.
Wow.
And yeah, I'm very excited to be here today, and I just wanted to share how appreciative I am that you're here, Beto. I had a group in Cyprus. We were called Sweating for Cyprus for Beto. Who did lots of block walking. My red mom shirts was soaked very often, as much as yours often. And anyway, I'm so appreciative that you're here. I'm so thrilled to get to meet you. And as you all know, Liz is a GSC candidate, and thanks to Anna, she helped her get that early, so Moms is ready to walk and pump bank and do all the things for Liz and all of the GSC candidates. And so we're here to listen and to help however we can.
My name's Audrey Burrow. I'm the co-group lead for the Katy West Houston group of Moms Demand Action. I'm also a constituent of yours. And before the primary runoff, organized a few different women who'd never knocked before, and we knocked over 100 doors for you, and we're excited to get back to work.
Yes.
Great.
Perfect.
That's awesome.
My name's Anna Carpenter. I am a gun violence survivor as well. Teacher for 13 years, and then switched over to activism with Moms Demand Action because it's just so prevalent around here, and I don't feel safe when my children go to other people's homes, including their grandparents' homes, unless we remind them every single time your grandkids are coming. I currently work for the district attorney of Harris County. She's running for re-election, and she's very much a gun sense candidate. I only work for gun sense candidates because it's the life of our little ones. I'm sorry if I get emotional. It's just something that's always there for me. So when
Take your time, yeah.
sorry, when you dropped out, it was a big, it was hard to look for hope in that way because your concern is so genuine for that subject. But we're all here, and I appreciate you giving your support to ELIS because I'm also a constituent.
All right.
My kids, we're in HD 28, my whole street has ELIS signs because my kiddos go and give it to their neighbor friends.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm here and will be anywhere where I'm asked to go and give my voice to help find a solution to this problem.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'm Liz Hanks. I want to second her thoughts of just thanking you guys for bringing us here and having this issue be an important one for you. I grew up in Fort Bend, and then I moved everywhere else. And then when I was moving back to Texas about 4 years ago, it occurred to me that I would need to be worried about guns in people's homes. I had lived in LA for many years, in Boston, and it just wasn't really a concern. And I have 2 little girls, and so that's when I found a Moms Demand Action chapter in Houston. And I'm now the state legislative lead for sort of the whole Houston region. And I am excited to help however we can.
And I'm John Rosenthal. I'm the Texas State Representative for House District 135, which neighbors this area. It's Cypress. I have a little bit of Katy, Jersey Village, and I'm a freshman legislator. I was the Legislative Study Group Legislator of the Year, Freshman of the Year. And because of my focus on policy that's good for Texans and my concern for the well-being of all of us. So I ran as a Moms Demand Action endorsed gun safety candidate. I brought legislation in the House, gun safety legislation. I will again in the next term for sure. The extreme risk protection orders are a huge item at the top of my agenda for exactly the reasons that we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, the mass shootings get a lot of attention, but y'all, 2 women a day die in this country from gun violence by domestic partners. You know, on average, it's like 56 a month. And just thinking about that infuriates me. And the part of what drove me to run was, you know, I'm a mechanical engineer from oil and gas. I'm not prone to flighty undertakings. And, you know, I had made comments that I've been criticized for about our government going off the rails. And in response to a gun violence epidemic, our government in this state has successfully weakened gun laws. And when I say that that's freaking crazy, people, you know, are critical of the language that I've used in the past. I'm trying to be polite here, but.
Do you say frickin' or do you say?
It depends on the room. But I have been known to swear on this issue, and it's because people's lives,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
are lost daily.
Yes.
For this, we lose 100 people a day in the United States in gun violence. You know, one guy tries to put a bomb in his shoes,
Right.
and forever we're taking off our shoes in airports now. So 100 people a day lose their lives gun violence in this country, and that is an epidemic.
Yes.
And it's exactly the wrong thing to weaken our state laws in the face of that. And you can see the statistics. So I'm a data person. Year over year, gun violence has increased in Texas as a result of weakening the gun laws. It's not a coincidence. So I'm going to be really happy to have Elise with us
Yes.
in the House in a Democratic majority, and we will be able to push our agenda. You know, the bill that I was carrying was to actually make it illegal to carry a gun openly while you're legally intoxicated. So basically, if you're too drunk to drive, you shouldn't be able to openly carry your weapon.
What
And
a novel concept.
I know, right? And people brought this to me, and I was saying, that's not already a law.
Right, that's my response right now. I
Right.
didn't know that wasn't already the law.
That's not a law in Texas.
Wow.
So not only is it earth-shakingly stupid that that's not a law, we couldn't get this to the House floor. I got it passed through committee, almost unanimous vote, but we couldn't get it to the House floor. That is how messed up
Yes.
the attitude is about this. So we need to change hearts and minds, and we can do that for the majority. So sorry for being on my soapbox. Thank you for having me here today. I hope I can contribute.
John, did you say that 56 women are killed per month by domestic partners?
Yes.
In this country through gun violence?
Through gun violence, that's my understanding.
I didn't know that number. That
It's like 2
connected very
million.
much to what you shared with us about guns not being taken away from those who commit these acts of violence. And I want to say this, I know you have a tough race in 2020, and your courage in being outspoken on this, I want to make sure that we share that far and wide
Thank you.
throughout the state. So those, regardless of party affiliation, who care about this and want us to just take common sense steps
Right.
like deciding that if you're too drunk to drive, you should be too drunk to openly carry a firearm in this state, that we pass that kind of stuff. So I'm grateful that you're serving, grateful that you're running for re-election. We want to do everything we can to be helpful to you. So just thanks for being here and thanks for what you're doing. That's impressive.
Can I dovetail on the domestic violence discussion, because I just testified in front of the Senate Select Committee on Mass Violence Prevention 2 weeks ago or so, and we were pushing, because we always talk about background checks and red flag
Yes.
laws, we wanted to focus on relinquishment laws And we pulled together some statistics that 54% of mass shootings include either a domestic partner, intimate partner, or a family member. So really, domestic violence is sort of this, it's really the giant elephant in the room. And if we can get our hands around domestic violence
Yes.
and the intersection between that and firearms, we might be able to make a big dent in our problem.
Say that again, Liz. 56% of perpetrators in mass shooting.
No, 54% of mass shootings across the board,
Okay.
one of the victims is either an intimate partner or a family
Gotcha.
member. So really, when we're talking mass shootings, we're often talking
Gotcha.
domestic violence or intimate partner violence, as we often say.
So they go to their partner's workplace or,
Or they'll kill the whole family.
yeah.
These types of things that happen all the time, and we don't see it in the news very
Right.
often. I want to say another statistic was 1 million women alive today in this country have been shot at, and 4.5 million women have been threatened with a gun. So to me, relinquishment laws are really where it's at in Texas, because when you are dealing with some more conservative members, there are laws on the books that require that these people relinquish their guns. No, sorry, that they cannot purchase a firearm.
Right.
However, many judges choose not to ever ask if a firearm is in the home, how many firearms are in the home, and there's no process or procedure for having those firearms taken away. So there are some judges, like in Harris County, who have come up with their own set of procedures, and it would be great if we could roll those out to the whole state.
Can I piggyback on that too? It's about domestic violence, but I looked at a lot of those same stats. So if you think that 4.5 million women have been threatened by a firearm, and 1 million of those have been shot at. And sometimes we're always so focused on deaths, which is horrible and final, but we're not looking at the intimidation piece. And I've been doing domestic violence presentations since my career started, and at every single presentation, somebody always asks me, why doesn't she just leave? Not one person, not one has ever asked me why he doesn't stop.
That's right.
And his behavior is illegal. But if we want to know why women don't leave, if they've had a gun aimed at them and their life has been threatened, or their children's lives have been threatened, or their family's lives have been threatened, that alone, just the intimidation and the psychiatric trauma it causes to where she's not thinking clearly, but she's thinking about survival.
And I have to add this, you know, we all have heard this by Einstein, the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing, expecting different results. We see the situations that you see every day, and then the mass shootings occur more frequently than they should. And then the response from, and I hate to say it, it's unfortunate that it's partisan, but the response from, you know, conservative members is they would like to do something, but they're beholden to the NRA. They're really literally beholden to the NRA, and they're afraid that if they do any kind of common sense reforms, that they're gonna be primary and lose offices. And I think that we need to put human life before we put politics. And we need to make sure that we vote our values. And until we do so, just like Congress passed a bill to help, the bill's over in the Senate, but they won't even take it up. Mitch McConnell said it's dead on arrival. So in this do nothing Congress, the Nancy Pelosi is sending over great gun reform legislation. But until we get people in the Senate that really value human lives over ratings with the NRA, you're not gonna get those legislation passed. That's what we're facing at the state level. John and I had legislation, we had other good, you know, red flag laws. I had a bill to close the gun show loophole that could have prevented some of these things. They don't wanna do any of it. I mean, none of it. The one bill that we did pass, with respect to, dealt with guns on the tarmac, the governor vetoed it. And so they wanna focus, just change the narrative to mental health or games, but it's so much deeper than that. And I'm happy that we're having this discussion, and I think the things that we're talking about can help shape the narrative for the next round of races that hopefully will decide these majorities that we're talking about, so that we can finally pass some of these things. I was hopeful, and when you went to El Paso, and some of our members joined you after that heinous, tragic shooting, that the governor would have the guts to call a special session so that we could do something about it. That's what most Texans wanted us to do, and they just kicked the can down the road. They put these, you know, and I'm happy that they put a interim study on it, but we've already studied the issue. We know what needs to happen.
That's right.
We know what needs to happen,
Right.
Beto. It's time for action.
Absolutely. I think you saw 7 years ago after Sandy Hook,
Yeah.
that if those in positions of power would not take action
Yeah.
in the wake of that kind of massacre, if after on August 3rd in El Paso, those in power did not take action, we need to change those who
Yeah.
are in power. And I want to make sure we give Eliz a chance to talk about this, because literally the first door we knocked on last night were two families who were neighbors who talked to us on their driveway, even though it was negative 30 degrees and it was bitterly cold. And literally the first thing that they brought up was gun violence,
Really?
which I thought was so powerful. So I don't know if you want to talk about what you heard, what you would like to be able to do should you be elected to the State House.
Yeah, of course. During the initial phase of this election and into this runoff, it's been very clear that gun violence and school safety has been a priority for the constituents of this district. I think that piggybacking off of what you had said, the tragedy in El Paso, coupled with Odessa Midland in the
Yes.
same month,
Yes.
and then we just 2 days ago was the 7-year anniversary of Sandy Hook. We're seeing this culture of fear on one side that's being irritated in a sense by this culture of gun worship, and we need to do something in order to make sure that our students can learn in the classroom instead of being forced to do gun drills, right? We see pictures of 3-year-olds standing on toilets to practice a active shooter situation, and to me that's not what we should be educating our students on. We need to make sure that we're not arming our educators. Governor Abbott passed the Marshall Plan in this last session, which allowed school districts to essentially arm whoever they see fit, whether that is a janitor, a cafeteria worker, a teacher, or a law enforcement officer. Unfortunately, we know that it's not going to always be the law enforcement officers who are the ones armed. Coupled with the fact that we should not be introducing more weaponry into the school system. I know that Cameron, who is a student at Seven Lakes High School and has been working on my campaigns for 2 years now, has told me that this is a very real fear for students. And I think it's really important that we get the student perspective, because they're living this reality. This is a reality that none of us actually had to live through. Not saying that we're old or anything, but just saying that, you know, when we were in school, we had hurricane drills, right?
Yeah.
Natural disasters, not these man-made violent outbursts because of an inability to halt the vitriol and hatred that's coming from the administration and society at large. And Cameron, I think it would be great to have your perspective on this as a student.
Yeah, I think it's just absolutely absurd that this stuff is happening. Like, I know at my school, whenever there's like a fire drill, or like the fire alarm goes off, I have that anxiety of, is it actually a fire drill or is it not? Like, that's what I think every single time ever since. Like, whatever, it's just kind of that paranoia, but it's real, it's not just paranoia. And I think I should bring up, so my best friend is from El Paso. She goes to El Dorado High School. So you know, you've been there many times.
Yes.
And so she lives right next to the Cielo Vista Mall. So whenever that struck, that was very hard for her. And you know, the city still hasn't recovered yet, and it's just terrible. And that constant fear of, is it gonna happen next?
I was reading some of Eliz's campaign literature. She has these 4 points, and the first one is to confront and combat hate and fear. And what we learned in El Paso, unfortunately, is that this environment that has been stoked of fear of Mexicans and Mexican immigrants and Mexican Americans has led to some really tragic consequences, most notably in El Paso on August 3rd, but really a day in and day out level of fear for the majority of Hispanic Texans. Univision did a poll in the state and found that the majority of Hispanic Texans fear that they will be the victim of a mass shooting because of their ethnicity or their immigration status. And El Paso, an 85% Mexican American town that just suffered this in August, feels that every single day. It's one of the phrases that we hear is disarming hate. We see a rise in anti-Semitism in this country. We see a rise in white nationalist terrorism. Klansmen marching out in the open in Charlottesville, Virginia, saying, "Jews, you will not replace us." The fact that so many of those men, primarily white men, are armed with AR-15s and AK-47s, weapons designed to use on a battlefield in war to kill people, should scare us and should alarm us and should provoke the kind of action and urgency that we need right now. So really appreciate you.
And it's the fact that like the hate is so strong in this country that somebody had the audacity to drive across the entire state of Texas.
Right.
And they had that like xenophobia from those Mexicans, but the majority of the victims weren't even Mexicans. So just the ignorance to like what you're doing, and that fear, and you're just doing the opposite of what you're thinking. It's stoking fear in the people that shouldn't have that fear in their lives.
That's right. That's absolutely
I
right.
have 2 comments about that, and then I have 2 questions about legislation. So my comment would be, my 10-year-old, you got to meet him. He absolutely idolizes you. But his psyche has changed. He doesn't look like a traumatized boy. He looks like a completely normal boy. But one thing he says to me when I go out and go to rallies or just do my job, "Mom, don't speak Spanish and take your driver's license so they won't know you're Mexican." Second thing, he's going to middle school next year, and he says, "Am I going to Seven Lakes?" "Oh yeah, baby, you might go to Seven Lakes." "Oh, that's a popular high school, right?" And I was like, "Well, it's very big. So there's a bigger chance of me getting shot." And he looks like a normal boy, but you sit there and how does he have to, he has to put this in his normal every day. So yeah, I mean, that's how our children are growing up. So it's a very real reality. And the questions I had for legislation. Is there a bill, has there been a bill, like to use those funds for the Marshall programs to secure schools instead? I know that we don't want to harden our schools, but my child's school in Katy, I feel very safe. They're double doors, which you can't get through unless you put your ID in, and all the IDs are put in first. And if not, someone comes out to meet you. And then you have to go into this closed off area, closed off from the classrooms, give your ID, they give you your badge, then they open the doors. And I feel really good about that. All the other doors, side doors, are sealed until dismissal. Is there something that has been proposed or could be proposed to take those funds from the Marshall program? Because I know that they're taxpayer funds for the trainings, right? And put them over to something like that?
So I actually have an answer for this. The funding for the Marshall program is from within the school districts, so they pay for it themselves. It's not it's not direct from the state government. But the other side of your question is, I actually did propose legislation to improve school building standards, implement some best practices that would make them tougher targets without turning them into prisons.
Right.
So we don't, the point about society being traumatized, especially brought by Cameron and you, that's what's going on. And it's not happening, it's already prevalent, pervasive, it's the air we breathe. We had a false alarm of an active shooter drill in my district just a few months ago. And Facebook going crazy, my office getting calls, I'm getting calls. I mean, people are like, oh my God, you know, it's not if there's going to be a school shooting, it's when, right? So anyway, this, I proposed it as a standalone bill, but it was wrapped into a school safety package. So actually state funds are going to help improve design standards, and also for schools that already exist, ways that they can be upgraded. So there's, for those schools where classrooms have glass walls, there's a film that they can apply to those that make them much more resistant to gunfire. And also tint them so that shooters walking down the halls can't just look through the windows to shoot a kid. You know, the simple idea of having a thumb lock on the door that the teacher can have from the inside, where you can't access from the outside. You know, little things like that actually can make a difference in these situations. So it's good to be prepared, and it's good to try to toughen up, but these are Band-Aid fixes.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Right.
Well, and I would also ask that it's up to each individual ISD to choose to implement some of these or none of these, or,
Yes.
right.
Yeah, it's not
There's
mandatory.
And there's nothing that can be done about that at the state house level.
I wouldn't say there's nothing that can be done. I'd say there's nothing we've been able to
Yeah,
push
that's
through.
Well, one of the
It
things.
can
Yeah,
be
it can be
done.
done.
We can make them do
If
it.
the will of the body, the House and the Senate is there, of course, the governor has to be on board with it. But right now, you have the governor and the lieutenant governor making it clear that they don't want any parts of it. So we can do it, we just don't have a representative government leadership to get it done.
The
Yeah.
political will.
Right.
And that's where I think moms is gonna hopefully come into play quite a bit, because as we all know, it is not a partisan group. We are not Democrat, Republican, but we are GSC candidates, right? We are getting behind and can get behind those GSC candidates, and I think, you know, having sat through, like many of the women in this room, through some of these school hearings and just listening to all of this background about how much money, the millions of dollars now that are going to hardening schools, rather than putting money, which many, obviously moms would prefer, in other areas, including counseling services, etc. But one of the issues I'd like to see where we could go with this is the fact that so many of the mass shooters, particularly the schools, the child, and it is a child, very often it's 18 or younger, often they got the gun at home. And so this issue of not having these things locked up and stored safely and used our Be Smart program for, you know, many in the room who know this, that the NRA has the Eddie Eagle program, and the onus is on the child. You know, the onus about responsibility is on the child, where it should not be. It needs to be on the parents. So I have a two-pronged question for all of you, which is, the first one is, what can be done further about making it a stronger issue legally? Because what we've seen, and this is a sad shame in the Houston area, but we've had a number of children killed by having a child get the gun from home in an accidental shooting or whatever. And it seems like the legal remedy for that parent who was irresponsible, as horrible and horrific as that is, nothing much happens, right? And sometimes, you know, it's a grandfather, it's, you know, the issue is, so what to do there? What can we do more about that? And then, as importantly, we know that in the state of Texas this past session, what happened is that cities like Houston, who locally wanted to do stronger laws, were struck from being able to do that in relation to gun sense. And so wanted to get your input on those.
Jennifer, can I ask a question just to
Sure.
bring me up to speed so that I understand
Yeah.
where we are? So the best account on Twitter and the worst account on Twitter is Shannon Watts
Yes.
from Moms Demand, because she educates me, but often it is, you know, she'll share a story of a 3-year-old in a car seat who reaches underneath her mom's front seat and finds a gun and shoots her mom in the back, or a little brother who shoots his sister because these guns are not secured.
Right.
And every one is heartbreaking. And I'm the father of 3, but even if I weren't, I think it would break my heart. What are could you tell us what the laws are now in Texas in terms of the responsibility and culpability for parents who refuse to secure their firearms in their house?
So I'm not an attorney. I think that the issue is that it's illegal to have it accessible like that. The problem is that most of and Anna may know more about this, but some of the DAs who would push this forward, I think very often what happens is that obviously there's been a tragedy in this family and they don't push the issue, right? So they don't prosecute.
Yeah.
But you want to talk to that,
So
Anna?
it's a misdemeanor, I believe, if you don't have it secured. So we know with misdemeanors, you get away with it. And a lot of it is that they've already suffered the tragedy of losing their child, that something more punitive shouldn't be imposed on the family. But that is really up to whatever prosecutor's taking the case.
Wow.
And it depends if there was someone else killed because of it, like let's say if the child took an unsecured weapon and took it to school and killed his classmates, then there would be charges because of negligent homicide or something to a third party. But it really does depend on what the charges are, and a lot of it is, just this kind of culture that they've suffered through enough by losing a child and possibly another family member, which I agree with. It is a lot of suffering, but at the same time, you need to know that you're not going to get away with it, because like with hot car deaths, we've seen that a lot of those parents have gotten prosecuted to the full extent of the law when they, forget that their child is in the backseat and their child dies. So that's negligence as well. I mean, that's just my point of view. But I think that there should be some sort of accountability with something like that, especially because, that child could go and kill somebody else. Which brings me to my second question that I had for you guys about what if we played devil's advocate with the side that says that it's mental health? And we said, okay, if it is mental health, then what if we pass a mental health bill saying that people that have displayed or, I don't know, have tried to take their own lives or something, I don't know, some clause, can get their, temporarily remove their guns. Because a lot of these, I don't remember the study, unfortunately, but I read that it was these mass shootings were also being looked at by some prosecutors as suicides with a lot of consequences because they usually end up taking their own lives. So if they take their own lives, that's mental health, right? And could we do something like that, like make it a mental health issue, but something that would make people that shouldn't have guns not have them?
Are you asking?
Yeah, I'm asking like you guys that write legislation.
If there's a finding,
there's
in terms of a mental health issue that person would have to relinquish their firearm. Is that the specific question?
Yeah.
I thought you were going a different direction, which is call their bluff and say, cool, we'll all get behind expansion of Medicaid so everyone can afford mental health.
Absolutely not. But I would like you said, roll it into something else. I know that ACLU wouldn't be behind that because the
every
rights
mental illness.
and every mental illness is different. But I'm just
Can I speak to that a little bit, because I am a mental health clinician as well, but I can see both sides of that coin. Having worked with batterers and victims, when they do personality profiles, most of them test psychologically relatively normal. The primary mental illnesses they would have would be like depression or anxiety, but those are so common. That would be a huge fishing net, I think. And with victims, there's a lot of PTSD, obviously, as well, but batterers are no mentally ill than the average person walking down the street. So that's the thing. I think, and then I'm not totally up on the research, but I think when people think of mental illness, what they're thinking of lots of times is somebody that's psychotic, totally out of touch with reality. That would be a smaller net and easier to screen for, I think. I just don't know what their actual risk or their violence level is associated with their diagnosis.
I believe I've read that you are far more likely to be the victim of gun violence if you have a mental health issue.
Yes,
You are to be the
that's true.
perpetrator
That's
of
true.
gun violence. So it
And the
seems
same
like
is true
a,
with women that own guns, they're more likely to be the victims of the.
Of the gun used against
yes.
them.
Yes.
5
Yes.
times.
and,
Wow.
and for Jennifer's question about, safe storage laws, did John or Ron or Eliz, do you wanna address that?
No, I very much agree with Anna. I think that if you take on the responsibility of gun ownership, that comes with responsibility, right? And if you break that trust that you formed with the government when you purchased that firearm, and if that gun is used against an individual because you failed to be responsible for safely storing it
That's right.
away from the hands of individuals who could be using it in a negative manner, that you should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I think that too often, as you said, we see children who get into weapons and there are grave consequences, and we often say, yes, the tragedy of losing a child is in and of itself punishment, and that is true, but unless we actually use the full extent of the law, we're never going to see changes occur. We're simply going to see these tragedies continue to repeat at an alarmingly high rate, and perhaps it would be a wake-up call to all gun owners to actually safely store their weapons and make sure that no other child accidentally comes into contact with that and uses it against himself, herself, or any of the family members involved.